about McLuhan at some time. What happened to McLuhan?
What happened to McLuhan?
In your diatribe.
Oh, I'll do it now. I was thinking about this last week. I consider myself a McLuhanite. McLuhan's great insight was that technologies, especially forms of media, shape human perception, not only at the societal level, but at the individual level. In other words, a culture which watches television is very different from a culture which illuminates manuscripts. He was talking about he was talking about media, print, radio, so forth and so on. Where I find his ideas useful is to then view altered states of consciousness induced by drugs and plants as extensions of the definition media. McLuhan's definition of media was it is an extension of man. Certainly drugs are this. And the bridge between these two domains is television, because television is a form of media and television is a drug of very addictive potential and society-shaping impact. It's hard for people to understand, like when you talk about television as a drug, some people say, once, I think it was in this room, someone said, but if it weren't for television, how would my children learn about nature? They let them in, yes. And so then, you have to explain to people, and this is not an easy concept apparently, that it isn't the content of television that's bad, the 30 murders a minute, the idiotic drivel about sex change operations and all that. It isn't the content that's bad, it's the media itself is bad. So it's not that National Geographic specials and Masterpiece Theater are better for you than Arsenio. It's that it's exactly the same thing, that the content is irrelevant. This was McLuhan's insight. This is what he meant when he said the medium is the message, And television works certain changes on people that are irrevocable. Blood pools in your rear end, you stare, your brain waves fall into a certain limited range, and you're on the nod. And just because there isn't a spike hanging out of your good right arm doesn't mean any dimension of moral righteousness is accessible to you when you look at other people who abuse states of mind. And the last thing I want to say about McLuhan, because it's the last thing I've thought in the privacy of my own mind, is people are always saying, why did McLuhan fade so quickly? It was thought to be this incredible breakthrough in the understanding of culture and media, and what the hell happened? The guy apparently had no disciples, and after a huge initial impact, it all disappeared. And I myself have been puzzled by this. And then it struck me last week as I was driving somewhere. McLuhan's message was anti-capitalistic. And that's what must have undone him. The establishment was not interested in hearing that television was heroin in any interpretation or from any point of view. And so he was just buried as a crank, an incomprehensible Canadian Catholic male white nitwit that nobody should bother with. But I think the insight was profound and can be taken further, because what is really happening, as I see it, in the culture wars now, is that McLuhan predicted a great clash between the television-based culture and the print-based culture. But in a sense, the compression of historical time made that phase of the culture war pass very, very quickly. And now what is happening is it's really a completely constipated, linear, mechanical, material, print-based money culture confronting a heavily tattooed, interactive, networked, psychedelic, polyamorous youth culture upon which it depends to keep its computers running and its databases clear. And so the exacerbation of these social differences and extremes is even more pronounced and accelerated than I think McLuhan would have expected at this point.
Why you don't mention Noam Chomsky? It seems like he's, amongst other people, Michael Parenti, who continued the attack on the media. Of course, Chomsky's more of a political, how the media is used to, pass along misinformation and to infantilize people and make the public incapable of critical thinking, and how the ruling elites are using the media as a tool for manipulation, and particularly the American public.
Yeah, well, I think he's doing a great thing. I guess the reason I don't mention him is I'm very wary of anyone I don't completely understand. And when I think of Chomsky, I think of transformational grammar. And I went to 10 lectures by him at Berkeley in the late 60s. And I was impressed, yes, but enlightened not quite, because I couldn't wrap my mind around what the rap was. He is doing great work. Gore Vidal is another person whose critique of American civilization is great. I guess I'm a little different from these guys because I've never sat down with Noam Chomsky, but I imagine that they are ultimately rational liberals, and believe that somehow political action will solve our problems. I have a slightly harder to understand position. I don't believe any mistakes have been made. I think history was a necessary phenomenon. The French have this expression, to step back before you leap. And I think history, all 10,000 years of it, was a gathering of our tools and a bracing of ourselves for what's about to happen. I also don't think governments understand or control the process. That the good news on this planet is that it's out of control. I mean, I never controlled it, you never controlled it. So when we say it's out of control, we mean that it's out of somebody else's control who really did dream of controlling it at one point and then lost control. I don't know who they are, the IMF, the World Bank, the UN, somebody out there, the Communist Party, they certainly lost control. And this lack of control in the evolving process means that it is not being obstructed by human intent or political manipulation. Whatever is happening has a will of its own. I sort of script it all back into biology. I really think that history is a temporary and unusual circumstance that even though it lasts, let's say, 15,000 years, it should be thought of as a very thin membrane between two very different kinds of existence. The existence of technology-less people living in their myths and their songs and their stories and their shamanically created world, and the fusion of billions of human beings with their own technological excrescences in a planetary and transplanetary culture. And the transformation is instantaneous. In that amount of time in biology, a fly adds a spur on one hair of the two front legs. That's the speed at which biology moves. And in that period, we go from a primate population with a symbiotic relationship to cattle and mushrooms on the plains of Africa to some kind of instrument of the logos that hurls instruments outside the solar system, downloads all information into databases, reduces the Earth informationally to a point, so forth and so on. Something extraordinary is happening here, and we are called upon, as people living in this world, to understand it. And one of the things McLuhan said that I love is he said, we are moving into the future like people who drive an automobile using only the rear view mirror. That's how we're going into the future. We're being guided by Marxism, Christianity, rationalism, Jungian psychology. Yes, all these things. But my God, none of this is referent to what is ahead.